Welcome back to the Testing 1, 2, 3 podcast. As always, I'm Brett, joined by Lester. Lester, today we don't have one topic.
We don't. We've got several.
Several topics. Today we're going to be answering some questions, or more accurately, Lester is going to be answering questions as I pry deeper and deeper for a better and better answer that you've probably run into, or I don't want to say they're the most common because they're definitely not, but they're questions that can sometimes snag us, and I think as Christians, I don't think a lot of us have really thought about. I don't think if we were asked, we would have a good answer to.
Yeah, I think we can categorize most of these into morally questionable things that happened in the Old Testament.
Yeah, all of them are exactly that, except for the first.
Yeah.
Which kind of goes along the lines of the morals of the Old Testament. But yes, these are morally questionable things that it seems like God condones or even orders in some cases. So we're gonna try to answer them the best we can. But as always, if you don't love our answers, email us or go find someone who's smarter than us and they'll have a better answer. So I'm going to start with question number 1.
Now you have to do that every single time.
I don't care. I'm in. Why don't we keep Old Testament law?
Yeah, this is a great question. I hear this one often from, most of the time, non-Christians, actually. The most ridiculous of which is like, oh, but you wear clothes of multiple different fibers. That's forbidden in Leviticus, this and that, or whatever.
That's a weirdly knowledgeable non-Christian about Christianity.
I've literally heard this one from a non-Christian. It is what it is.
Yeah.
And the answer is generally, in short, that the Old Testament laws can be categorized essentially into 3 types of laws generally: civil, ceremonial, and moral laws. So civil laws have to do with the way that the nation of Israel is set up, governance, that kind of thing. So for example, in the time of the judges, there would be a judge, or in the time of the king, this is how the king rules, X, Y, Z. Ceremonial laws have to do with cleanliness or uncleanliness, and kind of the ritualistic sacrifices and those kinds of things.
Lot to do with the tribe of Leviticus.
Levites, yes.
Levites, yeah. I knew I had that. Sorry, we've been going for a while here.
Yeah.
So,
Yes, so lots to do with them, and also to do with the priests who are administering sacraments and all those kinds of things.
Or how to bring us, like if you're bringing a certain, what do you bring to atone for certain things? Or how do you, I mean, actually all Jewish kids would learn this at a very young age growing up. But we obviously don't have the sacrifice anymore, so those obviously don't apply.
Well, skipping ahead here. But anyway, the third category is moral law. And so these would be things like thou shalt not steal, you shall not bear false witness, please don't kill each other, those kinds of moral laws. So those 3 types of laws, Jesus fulfills all 3 types of laws. So then what remains? In Galatians 6:2, Paul says, carry each other's burdens, and in this way you will fulfill the law of Christ. So then, we understand that while Christ fulfills the law, there still remains the law of Christ. And the law of Christ is not something that we strive to do in order to gain entrance into heaven, but rather something that we, by the Holy Spirit, now desire to do. Because of the Holy Spirit's work in us, we desire to obey God's commands, the law of Christ, because we desire to be more and more like Jesus. Now, why don't we not eat shrimp anymore? Why is bacon so delicious and I eat it all the time? Why do I wear polyester and cotton clothing? Because, again, Christ fulfilled that part of the law for me. Especially those things have to do with ceremonial cleanliness, and Christ makes me clean. Not eating shrimp does not make me clean. Not wearing clothes made of a single fiber does not make me clean. What makes me clean is Jesus.
It doesn't make you unclean.
Yeah, it doesn't make me unclean.
Yeah.
Jesus is the one who makes me clean.
Yeah.
And so that part of the law is fulfilled. But that doesn't mean that I have an excuse to act immorally. while Christ does fulfill the moral part of the law, I also desire to be more and more like Christ. And so that part of the law still applies.
Yeah, easiest way to think of this is we always the common answer is like, oh, Christ fulfills the law. That you hear that a lot.
Yeah.
In fact, that would be an answer I would give somebody
Yeah.
if I was asked. But the whole point of the cleanliness laws was because God wanted his people to be able to enter his presence or enter in relationship with him. Whereas Jesus solves that for us. We now have relationship with God because of Jesus' sacrifice. We don't have to sacrifice animals because he is the ultimate sacrifice.
Yeah.
He's a perfect sacrifice. So when you think like, oh, well, you know, we obey, like some people will be like, oh, we can't do this, and that's only really written out loud in the Old Testament. Well, yeah, because God still wants us to be morally upright, and Jesus proves this through his life. It's not like Jesus lives a morally terrible life or the whole thing wouldn't work. Yeah. He shows us he wants us to have morals. He wants us to be morally upright. But the whole, you have to, you know, you can only do this and that for the ceremonial cleanliness or for like the priesthood, that doesn't apply anymore.
Yeah.
Right? It just doesn't apply because that we're all made clean through the blood of Christ. And that's in how many songs? You know what I mean?
So many, all the songs.
So that if you're thinking about that'd be the easiest way for me to think about it is like, listen, anything to do with cleanliness or ceremony doesn't apply anymore because he is the temple on earth. He solves that problem, him coming to earth and dying for us, and then his perfect sacrifice, which is literally a perfect person sacrifice who is fully God and fully man, also solves the cleanliness problem. So when I give my life to God, I am made clean, and I can be in relation, which is being at the temple. Yeah. Therefore, the only thing left is for me is to follow his ways and live a Christ-like life, which is a morally astute life.
Upstanding,
yeah.
In line with biblical principles. And I would say that the Holy Spirit is within you. And so those cleanliness laws...
I mean, that's not a controversial opinion, I hope.
Yeah. Yes, of course. But those cleanliness laws no longer apply because Christ is the one who makes you clean. And finally, because the Holy Spirit lives within you, you are now becoming more and more like Christ. So you will then follow the moral law of God.
Yeah. I think that answers it.
Yeah.
But if you're like, wait, but still, what about this example? You probably will be able to answer yourself if you just think, was this a ceremonial law? Was this a moral law? Or is this a law for like cleanliness and stuff like that? If you think about it that way, you'll probably come to your answer. If not, go ask your pastor, go shoot us an email, something like that. Maybe there's one that you're like, I still don't get why we do this.
Yeah.
And I'll be honest, there's some churches that practice weird things, not because they're biblical, just because they practice weird things. I mean, like I wouldn't use every church as an example of what's perfect because, I mean, we of all people know how broken we really are. Question number 2.
Look what you've made yourself do.
Polygamy in the Bible.
Yes. Yeah. There seems to be quite a bit of it in the Bible. Not seems to be. There definitely is.
I'll rephrase my question too. Some of the main characters and most important people who are revered as being very filled with God or very close to God or very faithful or very obedient have multiple wives.
Yeah. Just to name a couple, David, Solomon,
really, he puts numbers. But even go before. Who did you bring up before this? Jacob. Or Israel, if you want to call him that. Gets a name change. Why?
Even Abraham,
he sleeps with somebody else.
Side dealings.
That's not polygamy. That's just having sex with someone who's not your wife for a kid. And your wife, wanting
condoned
you to.
it.
I'm not going to get into that right now. But we see a lot of men who are known to be men of faith have multiple wives.
Yeah.
Whereas the church today would very much not preach, go have as many women as you can.
Yes. And I think that...
I should reframe that, go as many wives as you can.
Yes. While the Bible does not explicitly say that, polygamy is absolutely the worst and you will die if you're a polygamist because polygamy...
So you're saying we should do it?
No, hold on. Polygamy does absolutely happen in the Bible. And even God blesses some of the children that are the result of that polygamy. The Bible doesn't also affirm polygamy. It doesn't say that this is the good thing, this is what you should strive for. In fact, I would say that the Bible's overarching narrative is actually one of monogamy, one of one man, one wife. And you can see this design in the very beginning. In Genesis, God makes Adam, and he makes for Adam one wife. Adam,
her name is Eve. No, I'm kidding.
Eve. No. And then he says after that, therefore a man shall leave his one father, one mother, and cleave to his one wife. And so this is God's design for people, for us, for his kingdom. And I think that polygamy is something that, yes, God used, but God uses a multitude of situations for his glory. And sometimes he can take our sin and our fallenness and even then turn it into something for his glory.
So could a good way to wrap up the answer you're giving is, just because there's sin doesn't mean God can't show up in that sin.
Exactly.
And just because there's sin just because we sin doesn't mean God condones that sin.
Exactly.
I think sometimes it's hard to believe because you're like, well, David was such a man of God. Wouldn't he have known what he was doing was wrong?
I mean, he probably did.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just asking the question. Like, I think they'd be like, why would God stay with him? Why wouldn't he,
Because God is faithful and he knows that we are fallen. And I mean, polygamy is one of those sins in the Bible that, I mean, I hesitate to use this saying, but I'm gonna say it anyway. There's a little bit too much pee in the pool, if you will, and so sometimes God's overarching narrative and his mission isn't exactly every single sin in every single circumstance, and he's going to use your fallenness sometimes for his glory, and sometimes he can.
Not that he's encouraging
Not
us.
he's encouraging, yeah.
Not that he's encouraging to keep sinning, but he understands that we're all sinful.
Yeah.
And we should all get that. We all understand that God works with our sin.
Yeah.
And that would be the explanation is like, listen, it wasn't like God was like, hey, yeah, go have 100 wives.
Nope.
But he doesn't have to treat the kids bad just because the father made a sin, right? Like he doesn't have to not bless the family just because of one sin. Mm-hmm. And that would be the point.
Yep,
You're making.
that is the point.
All right. This one, please listen all the way through the question, listener, because this might sound like I'm saying something crazy. But it seems like God condones or uses genocide multiple times in the Bible. So the question is God saying genocide is good?
Yeah.
Clearly that's not what I'm asking. I'm saying, why does God condone killing
Yeah.
of thousands of people?
Yeah. I mean, the Israelites are explicitly commanded multiple times to wipe out entire nations.
And they even get in trouble when they don't kill
Yes.
everything. So that would be...
This happens several times. It's not like one time and then like, oh, okay, whatever.
Oh, I forgot. Question number 3. Genocide.
Yes. As though genocide is questionable. No, it's bad. But I think that when we look at those instances in the Bible, we have to understand the context. First, it's really important to understand who God is. God is the creator and sovereign above all things. And when he commands something, then there is good reason for it. Not only is there good reason for it, but it is the right thing to do because he is the very definition of what is right. He is the one who defines what is right. Ultimately, it's not for us simple humans to tell God, this is moral, you should do this, and you shouldn't do this. I feel like you did something wrong, or you did something right here. It's God's ultimate directive.
But shouldn't we repeat God's actions?
Should we what?
Shouldn't we repeat God's action? If God does something, that would mean it's holy.
Hang on now. Hang on. Hold the phone. So, with that said, we do have to understand the context of why he commands specific killings, if you will. There's no better word.
Specific. We're talking about
genocides. So, you have to understand, for example, the Canaanites were absolutely abhorrent in the eyes of God. And if you understand anything about Canaanite religion, you'll understand Molech, who was one of the gods of fertility. In order to appease the god Molech, he would often require child sacrifice, sacrificing of multiple children, not like one child.
Infants.
Lots and lots of infants. Molech is only pleased with child bloodshed. And so those practices were abhorrent to God, and God condemned these people to death.
Yeah, there's interesting. I mean, we see this in a lot of cultures around that time. Sacrificing children is pretty common, and there isn't the value placed on a human life as there is in our society, right? Like as we get through time, we see that each human life becomes more and more valuable. And I would say we're continuing to improve, right? Like every day we get better and better at understanding every human does value. It is interesting. But I think I've always just answered this like it's really hard to try to enforce your morality on God and try to say, well, this is right and this is wrong when he's looking at the whole game and you can just barely see a half of a piece, right? Yeah. In this how many people will live, let's say 20 billion people will live throughout history. It's really hard to be one of those 20 billion and judge God when he sees the whole board. So not that that's an amazing answer and not that we like can give you every reason why says go kill every single person. But there is good reason, and a lot of times is one it's the justice is coming to those people. It's not like he just going to a tribe of good doing people and killing them. Sometimes it's the justice that they deserve. And the truest thing said in the Bible is for the wages of sin is death. Yeah. We deserve to die. Yeah. So the whole idea of like, well, he shouldn't have killed them. You get into a really questionable spot when you start to judge the morality of God. But I do understand asking a question because if you're talking like, you guys believe in this God, but he just like in the Old Testament, everybody. He just kills everyone. Like, who would want to believe in that God? It's tough for us to put our minds in the situation, but when the Jews, like when the Israelites, we would say Jews now, but when the Israelites came in there, their religion was so countercultural to the rest of the world. It valued people more than anything else, and God builds on that because the problem is God can't just come in one day and solve everything, or else he'd have to get rid of us because we are the problem. Yeah. So sometimes we think like, why didn't God just set up a society that has all the right values and does that and stuff? It's not that God doesn't have those values; it's God to understand how slowly He has to work through us. And so sometimes I've heard examples like, listen, like. You can't judge the morality of God, and you can't get mad at God for showing up and not solving every single human problem because that wasn't Jesus' goal. Yeah. His goal was to solve an eternal problem that we had no ability to solve. I'll move on.
Yeah. I think
no, I won't because you want to add something to it.
Yeah, I think to summate that, yes, in these specific Old Testament circumstances, God used the Israelites to mete out His justice.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough thing to say. I'll be honest. I don't feel great like being like, but I also know I've had experience of God and I've experienced Jesus in my life. And I know that I'd way rather serve him for his love, his compassion and grace, but still understand that it's about his kingdom and it goes his way. Like, you know what I mean?
But I will say that God no longer does this.
Yeah.
Because Christ has come.
Yes. Obviously, I think.
And so
goes without saying.
Yeah, it's really important to make that distinction and not go the extreme other route where like.
Why isn't he doing that?
Today? Yeah.
Or is he doing that?
Yeah. Doesn't God do this today? And that's where you get into racist kind of ideology.
You get into some very dangerous people using the Bible to explain what they're doing.
Exactly.
And we don't support any of that crap.
Exactly. Right? Crusades and Nazis and all those kinds of things.
People try to use it.
And finally, one last point about genocide. Some biblical scholars will say, you can take this or leave this, but some biblical scholars will say that oftentimes with documents of this kind of age from this time period, they will say that they absolutely obliterated a nation or like killed everybody. But in reality, for example, you'll read that the Israelites obliterated the Amalekites, and then they pop up like 4 chapters later attacking the Israelites again. Well, where did these guys come from? Clearly, you didn't kill everybody because this nation still exists. So then it's kind of a hyperbole to say that they slaughtered everybody sometimes. It's like it was a crushing defeat. Like you really beat them. But
they went to battle and they absolutely won.
Yeah, they hammered them.
Yeah, I don't know if that's the greatest argument, but
this is what this will be Dr. John Kessler, if you really want to look up. He's one of my professors at Tyndale, wrote the book on this.
All right, stop plugging people. All right, moving on to the last question we're going to talk about today. Not that we won't do another one of these where we talk about questions. Kind of going along with what we've talked about. Killing children. Oh, wait. Question number 4. No. Killing children. It seems that God, A, kills children, or B,
is okay with it?
Okay with it?
Yeah, I mean, what does he command Abram to do?
Kill your kid.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost a wild command. It's crazy if you think about it. Like for years and years and years, decades even, Abraham waits for a son, Isaac, and then all of a sudden he gets his son Isaac, and then God goes, you know what? Kill him, sacrifice him, and I think that it's important for us to realize in that passage that God designs that specifically to test Abraham. God never actually wants...
Kind of a weird test.
God never actually wants Abraham to kill his child. What it is that Isaac is the representation of God's promise to Abraham. And God is saying to Abraham, do you really trust me to provide all that you need and be good for my promises, or are you just simply happy with receiving the son and then like
I'm out?
I'm going on my merry
I want to
way.
move past Isaac because most people who read that story, or if you spent any time in the story, you understand that the Isaac was never going to die. It was a test of Abraham's faith, and I mean it's sometimes used against Christian, like what a bunch of wackadoos, like killing their sons and then like luckily saved. I mean I think there's a movie where it's in. It's a Jack Black movie, and they like
one first century BC or something
like that, and it's they're like accidentally walking by when he's about to do it.
Like,
what are you doing? He's like, are you an angel? He's like, yeah, don't kill that kid. Like, but the truth is that Isaac was never going to die in that scenario. God was testing his faith, and you can have your questions about why would God test his faith like that. Now he is the father of like the 3 biggest modern religions in the world, and the religion that we hold true, and but not the father of the religion, but that's where God starts.
Yes,
the plan. I think I want to move it to more. There's actual kids who die.
Yes, there are real children that do die. If we think about like the Israelites marching around the walls of Jericho and the walls kind of collapse, I would imagine that a child or two had died in there. Now, it's important to again remember the same answer that we had for genocide, that ultimately God is the one who is the arbiter of what is righteous and unrighteous, what is moral and immoral. He is the one who metes out justice according to how he desires. And so it's a dangerous thing for us to question him. However, I will say again that Dr. Kessler's answer does apply here. Sometimes when
but that applies to a number, but it still, we know that it happens to some, and I think the point that people would make is like, well, it's kind of crazy that God would let even just one child die. Wouldn't he give that child a chance? Wouldn't he do that? You know what I mean?
And I think that A, sometimes the kids didn't die, and B, even when they did die, we have to remember that for all have sinned. It doesn't say for all adults have sinned, or you've reached the age of 18 and now you've sinned. For all have sinned. And so children, because of what we talked about with our episode in Original Sin, are a part of that. And so when he metes out justice in his timing, it is righteous.
Yeah, I'll be honest. I don't love that answer. I don't have a better one. I think that's something that's tough to get our minds around because we're like, oh my goodness, how could you kill kids? Not that everyone in our society is saying, oh my goodness, how could you kill kids? Not to go down that rabbit hole, but I think a lot of people are like, that's insane, and why would God let that happen?
Yeah.
Isn't God loving? Isn't he fair? Wouldn't he give everyone a chance? I think, again, we're ascribing our own morality onto God, and we get part of that morality from his word, so we think sometimes we might take that a little further. I don't love the idea of just saying, well, like we can't judge God. No, we can't judge God, but we also shouldn't just be so blindly and just say, like, God told me to do this. We should test what God's saying, because I can't judge God, so I'm going to go murder my family tonight. It's like,
no. That's
not in the Bible.
Yeah,
that's not. You should challenge. So we should be critically thinking about the Bible.
Of course.
God doesn't want us to just be like, oh, well, it says it, so I'll do it. We should be critically examining what God calls us to do. I mean, he doesn't, and he will reaffirm it in other people. I mean, there's many stories of even in our own church, how people got called to certain things. So the reason I don't love that answer is because I want to know the full answer, and neither of us can provide that.
Nope.
And so I think sometimes we're like, well, you know what? If I don't have that whole answer, then I can't believe in this guy. And you know what? I can't get you around that. You know why? Because I don't change hearts. The Holy Spirit does.
Yeah.
And so it becomes tough for us to sit on a podcast and answer a question like this, because it's like we don't have the answer, and it seems crazy at sometimes.
Yeah.
And we can give a little snippet into the justice of God and the humanity of God and his plan. Again, I can use the example we're seeing one piece out of 20 billion. He sees the whole board and how the whole game is going to happen. It just sucks sometimes, and there's nothing we can change about that. But you're going to put your faith in something.
Yeah.
I promise you that, whether it's the faith of nothing, like an atheist puts their faith in nothing, that there is nothing beyond this, or faith in any one of the religions that have sprouted over time, or your faith in Jesus, you're going to do it, whether you realize it or not. So I've always come back to, well, I got to ask myself my question. If I'm going to put my faith in something, who or what do I want to put my faith in? Right? And it's tough, because that's a tough thing to tell people. Is like, hey, listen, we don't have all the answers, but I'd rather be honest about it.
Yeah.
Right? I think you give as good of an answer as you can give.
Yeah,
but it doesn't suffice. If I was sitting here and I was a non-Christian, I'd be pretty pissed that was your answer.
Yeah, ultimately, it's not a feel-good answer.
No.
When we say God is sovereign, this is included in that, and sometimes it
just seems like a cop-out sometimes.
It
right?
feels
seems
sucky.
It feels like, oh, they're just saying God is sovereign, so he can do anything. Well, the truth is, he can do anything, and it doesn't always work with us, or we don't feel like. But
it doesn't feel good.
It doesn't feel good, or that can be because of our own selfishness, because we don't see what's going on. And I know we said we give answers to all 4 of these questions, and the truth is, we're telling you we can't give you all full answers to some of these. But I hope it helped just spark in your mind. Maybe you're going to think more critically about some things. Maybe you're going to dive into the Word and be like, maybe there's something there, because I guarantee you there is. But it's just it's tough when especially those last 2 questions, when you're like, this is our best guess, but we can't really say,
It's better than a guess, but
this would be our answer, but it's not the whole answer. It's not the whole answer.
I will definitely give you it's not emotionally satisfying.
No, not at all. And also we start to see, I think it challenges us because we see how small we are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know what I mean? We're like, wow, we are a lot smaller.
Yeah, I'm not in control at all.
No, not at all. I'm going to end it there. We're going to do other podcasts where we ask questions or answer questions to our best of our ability on this, on stuff like this, but I'll leave it there. As always, guys, reach out to us, provide us with some of these questions. testing123@springvale.org. We'd love to hear from you. I have nothing else to add. Lester?
It's good.
All right, guys, we'll see you later.